Hank, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, you're so welcome.
You flew in especially from New York to come and do this, right?
Yeah. You know, when I heard about it, I thought, yeah, this is going to be really good.
Well, thank you. Tell me, who is Henk Rogers?
Well, okay, so Henk Rogers is a computer game designer turned entrepreneur, publisher, father of 4, grandfather of 9, and now I'm a climate warrior fighting climate change.
You've still got a major glint in your eye. There's so much you've already done. You could have stopped. We were just talking about Hawaii before we started filming, right? But you're not there now, you're talking with me. What's driving you? What's keeping you going?
You know, there's so many things that need to be fixed in the world, and I feel that, you know, I've gained some, how can I say, some abilities in my career, and I need to use those abilities to do something good.
That's brilliant. So what's the purpose? So the abilities along with experience, right? You've got so much maturity, perspective. What is driving you in terms of the purpose?
It was like a month after I sold my company, I found myself in the back of an ambulance with 100% blockage of the widowmaker. 95% of the people who have that happen to them die. I obviously survived in that ambulance. The first thing I said was, "You've got to be kidding me! I haven't spent any of the money yet. You know, I just sold my company."
All this graft, all this output.
Like what the hell? And the second thing I said, "No, I'm not going. I still have stuff to do." And in the recovery room, after I have 2 stents, in the recovery room, I was thinking about what did I mean by that? I was obviously near death, and so I decided to figure out what is it that's going to me off if I didn't do something about it by the real end or the next end of my life. So that I decided to find my bucket list, and stuff wasn't like I had already made enough money, so my wife didn't need me anymore, and my kids were all finished with college, so they didn't need me anymore. So I'd done the normal stuff that you would think you want to do before you retire.
You cannot say normal. There is nothing normal about your story at all, right? I've watched a movie about you, and I want to go to that actually. You know, the risks you took. You know, if anyone has watched Tetris and knows your story, and we'll talk about that, but the risks you took, signing up your in-laws' land, putting everything on the line, which included your health, your own safety. I want to talk about that because I'm an entrepreneur.
Okay.
I've taken some pretty calculated risks in my time, so I've got perspective.
Yeah.
But watching the movie, and I know it's a Hollywood, but it's based on your
journey. There's a little
journey.
Hollywood involved. Come on,
okay.
They took 2 years of my life, squeezed it into 2 hours, and.
But you're not going to say you didn't take those risks,
no
right?
risk, no reward is what I say. You know, if you're not ready to take risk, get a job, and have the security, and get the paycheck and don't think about anything. But if you have a drive, get outside the box. Once you're outside the box, don't get back in the box. Stay out there and do something.
So you never felt the need to you accumulated a lot of money at the end of this, right? You could have then gone back into a box, not to get a job, but just to not keep putting yourself out there. But you didn't have a moment where you're like, that was exhausting. That's been so stressful. I need to have an easier life. It feels like, you've just told me your schedule, previous and upcoming, right? It's mental.
So I took 2 weeks after I had my heart attack. I took 2 weeks off.
Is that the only 2 weeks you've ever taken off, right?
That was it. That was it.
And that's that wasn't even 2 weeks off. That sounds like it was where you were evaluating your goals. So
the doctor said don't do anything for 2 weeks. I thought, okay, fine. I couldn't go to work, so to speak. No.
But that's where you were plotting and planning your next.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so you're not doing anything. Some people get a parasol, sit on a beach, and switch off.
I find that so difficult to do. Like if you gave me a beach and said, sit here for a couple of hours, I would go nuts.
Yeah, I can tell. Hyperactive,
I want to do something. I would be looking like, what's behind the beach? Or I might build a sandcastle or whatever. But I mean, I would do something. I wouldn't.
But going back to Tetris, you broke so many rules. You had to, and you chose to as well. So effectively, at times, you put yourself in danger. That's one of the things that I wanted to ask you. Actually, it was covered in the film in Hollywood style, right? But there were times when you were somewhere you shouldn't, and then particularly in Russia, which was not a safe place to be to achieve a goal.
I was in the Soviet Union, and I was on a total adventure game because I didn't know anybody. Just arrived there. Basically, I looked at it as an adventure game, and it was trying to find, how do I find a Lorg? I couldn't find There's no information. I went to, there was an information desk in my hotel. I went to the information desk. I said, Elektronorgtekna. I even wrote it down. Niet, and then I said, oh, maybe it's under Elorg, ELO. Niet. And I said, come on, there's got to be, and they didn't speak a word of English. This is the Intourist Hotel. You would expect somebody to speak something else besides Russian. And so she hands me bunk, like the telephone book. And I open it up and it's all in Cyrillic. It's like, come on, this is useless. So,
but to you, that's just an obstacle, right? You weren't going to stop. You're always going to get around it. I can tell that the relentless resilience that you've got to ultimately achieve an outcome where you breaking those rules, finding a way through, and you're still doing that now, right? I want to flip to the kind of green energy climate sort of crisis that you're trying to influence.
I was in the recovery room and I was reading the newspaper. In the back of the newspaper was a little article. It said, oh, by the way, we're going to kill all the coral in the world by the end of the century. Now, I moved to Hawaii when I was 18 from New York City to Hawaii. So I'm on the beach for a year, surfing and diving every day. I fell in love with the ocean. What 18-year-old wouldn't? And so that's so callous to say that we're going to kill all the coral in the world, by the end of the century. What's causing that? Ocean acidification. What's causing that? Carbon dioxide. What's causing that? We are. Okay, mission number one, obvious, end the use of carbon-based fuel. And because Hawaii was my home at the time, I said, well, I'm going to end it in Hawaii first, because I believe we got to clean up our room before we ask somebody else to clean up their room. I had no idea how to go about any of this, and I started.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, I had no idea.
It works for you.
Yeah, and so, but I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it. That's it.
Brilliant.
And that's really how we all need to start every journey.
So can you elaborate on that? So from not knowing what to do, but knowing that there's a really big mission there, which is a global mission that so many people are aligned with, but many people are trying and not managing to influence it. What are you doing that's different?
First of all, I found the biggest use of carbon-based fuel in Hawaii. So Hawaii at the time imported $5 billion a year of oil and $1 billion of coal. 30% of the oil goes to making jet fuel, 30% ground transportation, but 40% or $2 billion of oil and $1 billion of coal goes to make electricity. Electricity. Okay, so I said, first of all, we've got to stop using fossil fuel to make electricity. And so we tried everything. I started a foundation, Blue Planet Foundation. Bad name for the organization, because foundation sounds like we give away money. We didn't. We don't. I put money in my own money in every year to keep it going. We tried everything. Our claim to fame is in 2015, we passed a law in Hawaii that says Hawaii has to go 100% renewable energy for electricity by 2045. What that law does is it means no one is going to build any new fossil fuel infrastructure.
So it's protected infrastructure,
and because it won't be amortized by 2045. So nobody would consider doing that. And that is the first step.
That forces innovation, right? It forces the clever minds to be,
And it changes the utility from saying, no, we can't, no, we can't, no, we can't, to, hey, we actually have to think about this. And 6 months after we passed that legislation, they came up publicly, said, we've looked into it and we figured it out. We can actually do this by 2040. And I mean, that was a sea change. I mean, right there, with the electric company saying that they could do it from it's impossible. And after that, we changed the business model of the utility so they make more money by switching to renewables. Today, we're at 36% renewable energy. We're on track. And when you listen to the utility speak now, they sound just like us. So
they're aligned.
We're all aligned. The people, the politicians, the utility, everybody's aligned.
That's huge.
And so once that happened, once that started to happen, we understood it. It moved across the country. 15 other states have that same mandate, starting with California, but also including New York, Illinois. Over 50% of the people in the U.S. now live with a mandate that said they have to go 100% renewable energy by somewhere around 2045.
So you're actually having a massive influence on something that affects all of us from a multi-generation point of view coming through, right? And what would you say if I asked you from a legacy point of view, when I'm going to bring Tetris back in, which is how we would all kind of know you to this point. I'm learning about this green energy side of things now.
Yeah.
If you were to be taken off the planet in 10 years' time, is it talking about Tetris and the huge numbers there, or is it about the...
Yeah, it's about climate. I want people to remember me about climate.
That's your legacy.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting because you've been able to do this through pursuing the entrepreneurial sort of endeavors you had and all the risks you took to now be able to give so much back.
Yeah.
Which actually must be quite fulfilling because you put some serious graft and effort in, and now you're in a position where you can financially influence, but also going back to how you ducked and dived and nothing's going to stop you. What a person to have influencing our potential future of the planet.
I think young people, a lot of young people, specifically gamers, who have that drive to actually, the epic win, it's called an epic win. And they all strive for the epic win. That kid that beat Tetris, a couple of months ago, epic win. He was so like, yeah, we did it. And that's what I need young people to understand. We need to have an epic win and fix climate change. That's the epic win.
We also need role models. And that's exactly what you're doing there, right? You are a role model. And actually it joins up gaming. It's often associated as a young person's game. But I'm 47. I had a Game Boy. I played Tetris at school. And I'm not just saying that, and I know how good it was. And then you looked up and all your mates were a bit like what it's like now when you look up and everyone's on their phones on social media. But that's what started that whole thing. But role models, do you see yourself as that? Because you are.
I don't think of myself as a role model, but I realize that I am. I've always been. I'm the oldest of 15. I've been a role model for my siblings, and then a role model for my children, and then a role model for the people that work for me in my various companies. So I don't actually think of myself as a role model, but I don't do anything like ridiculous that would make, my role model wouldn't do that, that kind of thing.
I get it. But you're leading by example, right?
Yeah.
And you've got a book that's come out.
Yeah.
How much of your book is about the journey that we all would know from the film and that sort of got you to where you are now, and how much of the book is then going into what you're doing now?
The book is mostly my computer game career.
Understood.
And so it starts with me. How did I get in computers? How did I get into gaming? What's my early career? So yes, there's a lot of it. A lot of my computer game career has to do with Tetris, and so you'll find that everything. It started. I wrote the book because of the movie, because the movie has so much Hollywood in it. It's like the story is, I would say, at least as good in reality as it was in Hollywood. And you just can't take a career of 30 years and squeeze it into 2 hours and really get the message across. And so if you want to know what really happened, read the book. It's called The Perfect Game.
What are the big differences that potentially sound like there was a little bit of grating there? Is there anything that could have been done differently or better that would have made you more pleased with the film? I'm just picking up on the fact that there's a little bit there that you've written the book that tells the real story.
Yeah.
So, but how much of it was Hollywood changing things a little bit?
Yeah, it was Hollywood changing things, but I can tell you about the first time I saw the movie. First of all, I read the script. I worked on the script. They would let me change the things that had to do with Moscow in 1989, that kind of stuff. But they wouldn't let me touch the Hollywood stuff, like car chase and sleeping with the interpreter and all that. That was Hollywood.
It's good to know.
It's Hollywood, and it's fine because what they had to do was they had to take this 1.5 year long saga and squeeze it into 2 hours. So what's missing in the movie is what I'm doing now.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad we've been able to talk about that.
Which is really
super interesting.
Which is much more important than the movie. And frankly speaking, when the first time I watched the movie, I cried several times, and I cried about things that never happened in real life.
So you were emotionally invested in it.
Yes.
You were enjoying it. Well, that's good because it is entertaining. I watched it with my wife, and she really enjoyed it. She knew I was going to be talking with you today, and she enjoyed it as a story.
Yeah.
And we again talked about it afterwards, and she was just like, "He's an animal." He's So to know that I've already repeated it. So to know that you're doing something so important is inspiring. I want to just touch on computer games. I was the kid that played Tetris growing up, and countless people now grow up and computer games are multifaceted. You know, you can immerse yourself into gaming now with Fortnite and so on. Where do you sit with it, and what involvement do you still have in gaming?
When I started my game career, that I would never work on a game that I didn't want my children to play. I think that's a simple rule of thumb, because there's so many violent games out there. And would I want my children to play, I don't know, Counter-Strike? Not really. I know they have, and I don't forbid them to do it, but I wouldn't consciously help that side of the business move forward. I think that where the gaming industry has gone is like amazing. You know, it's outgrown the movie
huge,
business.
Right?
It's outgrown the movie business. You know, how big is the movie? We should be having Oscars, you know.
No, it's true.
Yeah, it is true, because the business is that big, and you know, that's...
The revenues are there.
The revenues are, you know, have surpassed movies. So, but we need to have a little bit of, how can I say, a little bit of like, what are we doing to our children in that space?
It's really
should be something.
It's really interesting what you said. Just on that, actually, there's an addictiveness that goes with games. You could say there's an addictiveness with Tetris. I remember what it was like to try and put it down, and you'd have a really good roll, and you get a really high score, and then it would end. And you put it, or you'd be happy, but you put it down, and then there's this whole like, and you go back to it.
Yeah.
And we now know that whether it's social media or gaming companies are fighting for your attention. So there's an addictiveness that goes in. You could argue that blights all games. Did you know, I remember reading and seeing in the film, you sort of elaborated that the bank manager almost took himself off, and you said it in the book, disappeared for like 3 days when it was released. He was playing the game.
That actually happened.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know because it was in your book. That's why
it actually happened, yeah.
Yeah. Where do you stand with the addictive side of things and relating that to Tetris?
You know, television is addictive. Football is addictive. They're all addictive. They're all addictions. We want to do them. And if you go back in time, like go a couple of 100 years or 100 years ago, we were preparing our children for a lifetime of physical labor. And so sports were really important. Be healthy and strong. But now we are preparing our children for a lifetime of mental labor. You know, be in that computer, understand the computer world. And games are a window into that world in the future. Games are immersive, but so will work will be immersive in the same way.
Yeah.
And so the children who actually play computer games will have a big advantage over those who don't.
It's really interesting.
And, I don't look at it as a bad thing. It's just,
no,
it
not
is.
at all. I just wanted to hear it from you, because I never felt like it was an unhealthy thing for me to doing. And here's something as well. A good friend of mine I went to school with, who was equally playing games, found out that fighter pilots would play computer games, particularly the fighting games, not the, hey, they went around, but the sort of Mortal Kombat fighting games, because of the combinations of moves that would be put in, and it was stimulating their brain, which of course...
Oh, it's more than that. It's more than that. You know, recently there was this, I watched this video about the Ukrainian in the it's not even a tank, it's a personnel carrier, and they took out a Russian tank. And how did you do that? As well, I played the game, and in the game I targeted they have like a camera thing on top, just hit that thing over and over and over and over again so that they can't see.
Wow.
And so he actually learned how to fight that was the Bradley. The Bradley took out a Russian tank. And so these simulations are so accurate. You know, race car drivers.
I was just about to say race simulator. They're in the simulator, and they go to a track they've never ever raced at before physically, and they're on the lap times.
They know exactly when to brake and corner and all that. Yeah.
So it does have a role to play, if you like, as well as that, because that was where I was going from, flipping it as a negative addictive. Actually, if you are doing something that is benefiting you, and that's sort of where I was sort of going with that.
If you think about exercise machines, like a running machine, what a waste of time that is. You know, like what are you doing? Spending hours in lifting weights or running, but you could say that's all a waste of time. You're building up muscles that you're never going to use. You know, that kind of thing. Bodybuilding, are you serious?
That's interesting.
So you could say all of that is a waste of time, but you're actually getting healthy.
Yeah.
And so it's not a waste of time.
Not at all. And you look super healthy. You look like you keep in shape and look after yourself. You have had, at times in your life, no time for that. Going back to building up Tetris and so on, and you're active and busy now. You just told me, you said you were flying out tomorrow night. What are you doing to look after yourself, both physically but also mentally?
Physically, I walk a lot. I live in New York most of the time. So in New York, I'm walking and playing table tennis. Whenever I have a couple of hours, and then I'll hire a coach and play table tennis. When I'm in Hawaii, my brothers are all playing pickleball. So I'm playing pickleball in Hawaii. Or hiking by my ranch. I have a 1,300-foot elevation hill behind, and I climb that hill once a week when I'm there. Mental health, I just don't take stress. Sorry, why? What's the point of stress? So people always ask me, like, how can you travel so much? I'm on this trip. I'm actually from New York to London, London to Abu Dhabi to Tokyo, to Hawaii, to Seattle, to San Francisco, back to New York. That's a typical trip for me. And I was once at an airport, and the flight was canceled, and we all lined up to get rescheduled. And there's an old man. He walked up to the front of the line and started yelling at the lady. And he was turning red. And I said, this guy is going to have a heart attack. And I made up my mind that I was never going to be that guy. I was never going to be that guy.
I can't imagine you being anywhere close to that.
And then the decision that I made that day was that I was never going to take stress from travel, no matter what happened. You lose my luggage, it's fine. I get more luggage. Miss my plane, there's another plane. You don't have my vegetarian meal, fine, no problem. And ever since, travel has been like stressless. I get on a plane and I just enjoy myself.
It's a conscious decision to not let it stress you out. Yeah.
And then that way of life has actually permeated the rest of my life as well. What's the point of getting bent out of shape about anything?
Fair play to you. I love it. Without trying to stress you out now, the mission you're on to better the planet and promote the green energy, you're going to need to be dealing with politics. You already have been in Hawaii and now and then moving that out to other states. But it feels to me like your mission is more global.
Yeah.
So again, politics is potentially a stressful place to be, but where there's agendas, there's blockades that even Henk potentially isn't quite sure how to navigate. How are you going about that? Because you're on a mission to make massive changes against people that are politically not aligned.
So let's start with the overall picture. It's the United Nations doing the COPs and the Paris Agreement. So the Paris Agreement, all the heads of state got together and said, we're going to do this. And first of all, this and the Paris Agreement doesn't go far enough to fix climate change. And second of all, nobody's on track for even that. So I don't have high hopes for the top-down approach. It's got to be a bottom-up approach. So what we did in Hawaii is we first got the people on our side. We had children go door to door and exchange 300,000 light bulbs just to get awareness going. We had other junior high school students draw on sidewalk where high tide would be in a 1 meter rise in sea level. That's the minimum sea level rise predicted by the IPCC. It's not the United Nations, it's the United People. And once the people get on your side, they push the politicians. And that's the way it works.
That's
it doesn't
smart.
work the other way.
That's
it works,
community,
it works
right?
This way. Yes.
That's community. So actually what you need, anyone watching, listening to this can ultimately get involved in this at some point when you're trying to engage the community in the different ways, right?
It's when we, the people, demand that we're switching to some other energy source, when we stop buying internal combustion engine cars.
Can you scale that? I mean, I guess that would be using social media.
That's why I'm here.
Understood. I'm with you now. I love that.
Yeah,
so what can the people do to align with the mission? Because I mean, why would we not want that? I've got two daughters, 13 and 15. They're my legacy, right? They're growing up. They love snorkeling. They love the oceans.
Make decisions in your life that help make the world a better place. If you have a choice between plastic or porcelain, choose porcelain. If you have whatever your choice is, you have all these little choices that you can make. I stopped eating beef. In Hawaii, my ranch, my house, off-grid. I have electric vehicles that I only charge at the ranch or at the house. So my ground transportation is zero, basically. It's solar. maybe it's because I've made some money in the computer game business that I'm able to be ahead of everybody else in terms of that. Just like flat screen TVs used to cost $10,000 or 10,000 pounds. Now they cost $600 at Costco. So renewable energy is going that way as well.
Yeah.
Things are going to get cheap and more affordable, and then people can make the choice. I think renewable energy is already much cheaper. In Hawaii, for example, electricity used to cost, the cost to the utilities 25 cents per kilowatt hour for oil. It's 8 cents for wind and solar. If you add batteries, which storage, now it's up to 12 cents. It's half the cost. And so we changed the business model from them making 10% on the price of oil, which is 2.5 cents, to, okay, you can make 3 cents on the price of renewable. That makes them more money.
Yeah.
And that makes them more happy.
More incentivized.
Incentivized.
Smart. Yes. It's really smart.
So,
on that, there's so much that you could point to in your life that's been successful. And I wish you absolutely, every success with what you're trying to achieve there. But with maturity and perspective sitting here now, how do you define success?
Well, first of all, if I could get all the jurisdictions in the world to decide to fix climate change, I mean, that's just a decision.
It's a mindset, it's a conscious...
It's just a decision. I'm going to do this. And I mean, all the leaders and people in leadership position, if you can make that decision, you will go down in history as being the one who made that decision. But eventually, all the people are going to need that decision to happen. And the sooner we make that decision, the better we off, the better world we leave for our children.
Yes, 100%. Talking of sort of children and bringing it back to kind of computer games, a lot of people watching and listening to this will have that association of Tetris and that sort of overlord of gaming. Anyone aspirational, whether they're a youngster or pivoting in life and would love to be in that industry, it's changed so much in the years you've been part of it. What advice would you give to them?
If you want to do something, do it. If you look at the original movie industry, if you look at the silent movies way back when, it's kind of cute, but look what it is today. You can go into the movie industry and do so many different things. The industry has grown. The same thing with the computer game industry. It's grown. What's your part? You can be a designer. You can be an artist. You can be a musician. You can be a marketer. There's all these different things that are going on.
So make your mark with it, because you were a disruptor, right? You came in and you didn't follow the rules. You didn't do what everyone else had done, and look where that got you.
Well, and frankly speaking, if you want to be really successful, you've got to do something that other people aren't doing. If other people are doing it, then somebody else is making the money, not you.
Yeah. I knew before we started talking that I would have 1,000 questions for you and we wouldn't be long enough. And that's where we've got to. But I have so enjoyed talking to you. You're an inspiration, and what you're trying to achieve now, I wish you all the best with, Henk. And I know that you've got such a crazy schedule. So to fit me in and film me today, it's a super privilege.
So what I'm trying to achieve is the wrong word. What I'm going to achieve.
100%. I should have thought who I was talking to you, right? No, Henk, 100%.
Yeah, so people ask me if I have hope. I do not have hope. I have determination.
You're a legend. Yeah.
Because we're totally going to fix this.
Yeah. Well, you've got my full support. Anything I can ever do to help you, Henk, I will. And thank you so much for talking to me.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.